Hey folks, Roland Brown, KY4RDB, back with the second installment of our DMR video series. And today we're just going to be talking basically about what is DMR, some terms that are important to DMR, and then kind of dive into a few of those terms a little bit deeper. So just kind of sit back and hopefully you're enjoying these video series. And of course, at the end of this one, I'll tell you what the next video one will be coming out is. So let's dive right in. What is DMR? And before I get into this, I want to say, if you've got some, if I maybe have said something wrong in the video, feel free in the comments section to comment. I'm learning this just the same as you are, so there's a chance that maybe I've got something in here wrong. Or if you've got questions about something, to put it down in the comments section, and I'll be sure to get back with you. So without further ado, let's get going. DMR, it stands for Digital Mobile Radio. That's all it is, fancy term. It's just another way of operating. It's no different than PSK31, CW, traditional just voice. There's there's different ways, as we know in this hobby, to communicate. So this is just another way. It's just a digital form of voice communications. All right. It was defined by the European Telecommunications Standards Institute, and that's the little bullet underneath there, which is right here. This is the actual standard, and you can actually take some time and look that up if you want to, and it'll give you a little bit more in depth. The idea here was a normal analog voice channel uses 25 kilohertz of bandwidth. So whenever the commercial market started going towards narrowband, which is where DMR started at, was in the commercial market. When they started going towards narrowband, they said, okay, well, we want to bring that down to where we're into the 6.25 kilohertz bandwidth, per channel. So what DMR does is through the use of this AMBE plus 2 vocoder codec, which is just a fancy word for saying, compression of voice into a digital ones and zeros format. They got it to where they could actually use 6.25 kilohertz of bandwidth per audio channel. So it became a narrowband standard. Now, DMR is one way of doing this. There are two competing standards. There's the P25 Phase 2 standard, which is a Motorola standard as well. It's actually, I won't say a Motorola standard. It's actually what we would consider open source standard. But most of us are familiar with the Motorola products that the Kentucky State Police carry and stuff like that. That is a P25 system. And to my knowledge, there is only one P25 repeater in the state of Kentucky that's used for amateur use, and that's in Hazard, Kentucky, and it's owned by Tim Osborne, K4TDO. So that repeater is that Hazard. Then, of course, there's also the next generation digital narrowed banding, or you may have heard it called Next Gen, NXDN. This was developed by ICOM and Kenwood, and it uses a little bit different technology to accomplish the narrow banding. So that last bullet there tells you that DMR and P25 use what's called TDMA technology. The next gen stuff uses FDMA technology. And what that means is it's how they manage to reach the narrow banding. And we'll go a little bit deeper into TDMA, which is what DMR uses a couple slides in. Just some more filler information for you. You may hear DMR referred to as Moto Turbo. As far as I know right now, in this area, commercially wise, the only commercial DMR repeaters that are in use are Letcher County School Systems, and I believe Coal Run Village PD out of Pike County. P25 systems, this is where you're going to find the Kentucky State Police. I believe Fish and Wildlife is moving here. Vehicle Enforcement's here. The National Guard has moved here. East Kentucky Veterans Center, they use a P25 system. Another kind of term you may hear when people discuss this, they may say, oh, that's an APCO 25 system, APCO P25 system. And then the NXDN, mainly this is going to be Kenwood in the commercial market. ICOM does have some stuff because ICOM and Kenwood developed this system, and the ICOM system is called IDS, and the Kenwood system, I can't think of it offhand, but I'll come back to it later in the slide and tell you. All right, so let's talk about digital mobile radio. The standard set 3 tiers. Okay, so there's 3 tiers of DMR. There is tier 1. This is a single channel or a peer-to-peer network. It can't be a tier 1 radio, cannot be used with a repeater system. Okay. It was originally set up for the European unlicensed digital private mobile radio 446 service. And all that big term there, that DPMR means 446, that just equate it to what we would call UHF or 440. That's all it is. So it's going to be in the 400 megahertz area. And really, tier 1 radios are of no use to us as amateurs unless we wanted to do just, straight peer-to-peer. I like to think of tier 1 DMR as a digital FRS, the little radios you go to Walmart and buy. It's got 14 channels on them. You may use them when you go hunting or something like that, or just going camping or something. That's kind of what I equate a tier 1 DMR with, just a digital version of those. Tier 2 channels, once again, these radios are going to be able to do narrow banding. They're going to have the ability to do, we'll get in a minute and we'll talk about time slots. They're going to be able to handle 2 time slots. Each time slot, equate that to kind of like a channel, and we'll talk about that more. You can use each time slot for either data or voice, or a mix of the two. Tier 2 radios are going to be used for repeaters, but the biggest thing is they use what's this IP site connector, IPSC. And this is a way of linking the radios together using the internet. The internet you may use cable modem, DSL modem, maybe it's a cellular connection, a hotspot router type deal. And when we're saying linking, this IP site connect, what it's doing, folks, is just taking the place of where we have built links before, say between VHF repeaters. We've got a repeater, we've got a controller, we've got a UHF radio. So now we're talking about the repeater antenna, the controller setup we're having to do. The repeater, the other end, the link radio, an antenna for the link radio. So what this is doing is it's allowing that linking to be done behind the scenes via the internet. Now, that gives us some advantages because when we're doing UHF point-to-point links, there's still the range that we can get and the wattage. And on top of that, if we're out on top of a repeater site and let's say, for instance, that we're on battery backup or even the power we're consuming, we're powering the repeater, the controller, the UHF link radio, and anything else that we may have connected. This allows us to consume less power with less devices to accomplish the same linking. The other advantage is the distance that you can link with UHF radios. You can only go as far as your power lets you. With the internet, we can link with anybody across the internet. And the third tier is trunking systems, and there's not been a lot of move into the amateur market into Tier 3 trunking systems yet. I'm sure at some point there may be. It's just not yet. So that's the 3 tiers. Tier 1, just remember you want to try to stay away from a Tier 1 radio because it can't be used on a repeater system. Tier 2 is where you're going to find most of the radios, repeaters on eBay and stuff. They're probably going to be Tier 2 compliant. And then Tier 3, just remember, it's just trunking. So let's talk about some of the HTs or handhelds that are on the market currently today. This guy looks familiar, don't he? How many of you probably already have a Baofeng? You've got a UV5R probably. Some of us have multiple ones of them because they are the disposable ham radio. You know, they're $30. If you get them out and you break them, big deal. You know, you're at $30. They're handy to take out for field day. They're handy to take out when you're working an Aries event. They're easily programmed on the computer. Well, Baofeng makes a DMR radio. It's the Baofeng DM5R. It is a Tier 1 DMR radio from the factory. So right off the bat, that should be throwing up some flags for y'all that just saw the previous slide. Tier 1 DMR radio cannot be used on a repeater system. But yet, you'll notice, and some people are watching this right now, and they're going, oh, but my buddy's got a DMR radio from Baofeng, the DM5R, and it works. Yes, it works because there was a software patch that came out. These radios are going to cost you around about $65 to $85, which isn't bad. Like I said, your buddy's probably got his radio upgraded to a Tier 2 operation. However, if you go to the Baofeng website and look at this radio, there's this great warning line that's all over the page where you have to actually pay an additional $10 to the radio cost to get the software upgrade to make it Tier 2 usable. And I hope you all can see this, but if you can't, let me read it. It says, note, please do step by step in big red letters according to the file from customer service. Otherwise, your radio will be locked forever. There is no way of unlocking. Now, things like that kind of make me a little leery sometimes with products. And this is one product that I would be leery. Here's something else that bothers me about these things is a couple months ago I saw an email go out where a lot of DMR repeater owners are actually asking that this radio not be used on their repeaters. So the big giveaway here is stay away because, first of all, they're Tier 1 from the factory. You're going to have to do an upgrade that may brick an $85 radio. And then again, most repeater owners are asking you not to use this radio because it's causing problems, and what it's doing is it's tying up both time slots. Now, I know I keep using the word time slot, and you don't know what that is yet, but it's going to make sense to you and why this radio is a problem a little bit deeper down into the slideshow here. Now, TYT makes the MD380 and the MD390. Here they are. You'll notice they look kind of similar to each other. The radio on the left is the MD380. The radio on the right is the MD390. Okay, I actually own an MD380. I really like this radio. And when you start to get a little more complex into DMR and in the further videos I'll show you, there's a lot you can do with this radio. It's a pretty powerful little radio, and it's very ham-friendly in my opinion. These are Tier 2 DMR radios, so they're come straight from the factory, ready to use on a repeater. Average cost, the MD380 is going to run you right around $100. The MD390 is going to run you around about $130, $140. Okay? Now here's my thing. Why buy the Baofeng that's Tier 1? You got to pay an extra $10. Now we're up to possibly $95. We could brick it and it not work. Plus, repeater owners are asking us not to use it. For $5 more, we can buy this TYT MD380 that most repeater owners own themselves and are using on their own systems. The difference between the 380 and the 390 is the size difference, and the 390 is waterproof. Now, they actually, in these two radios, they make a GPS model that's got the GPS feature in both of them. Uh, Most people, from what I'm reading, are buying the non-GPS version because some of the DMR repeaters aren't turning on the GPS stuff. Okay. This is the most common entry-level radio, and here's the thing with this radio: when you buy it, you're going to get the radio, you're going to get a stubby antenna and a regular whip antenna. You're getting the charger, you're going to get the program cable, and you're going to get the programming software right out of the box. So everything you need to get started is coming in one box for the prices above. That's pretty impressive, especially when you start comparing these to some of the commercial DMR radios and HTs that are out on the market. Commercial wise, you're going to see Motorola stuff, and Hytera is who does most of the commercial stuff. A lot of the commercial radios will work in the amateur bands. As far as I know, right now there are no amateur mobile radios, but there are commercial DMR radios that will work down in the amateur bands. Especially a lot of the Motorola stuff will go down all the way like 403 megahertz on the UHF stuff. Each of these have a lot of unique features, and each are very rugged. You know, when we talk about features, the European standard we talked about before was set to make a general guideline for interoperability, meaning that they wanted to set a standard that it didn't matter if I had a TYT radio and you had a Motorola and your buddy had a Hytera and the repeater owner owned a Motorola repeater. They wanted it to where everything would work, okay, together with no problem. And I guess I should throw in right here that any Tier 2 DMR radio will work with any DMR repeater. So it doesn't matter brand to brand or anything like that. But on the commercial side of this, each commercial company has added certain features that sometimes causes this stuff to become non-operable. And when I say non-interoperable, it means that if you turn that feature on, then it'll work on some things, but it won't work on other radios. So Motorola has certain things that if you turn on for the Motorola, and people that have Hytera TYT radios, they're not going to be able to access that feature. Okay? So just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at some of this. The other problem with commercial stuff is anybody who has dealt with Motorola knows cables are expensive, software is expensive, and there's a very steep learning curve with programming some of this stuff. In our next video series, we're actually going to program a TYT MD380 for use. But we had to do this video first before we got there because I need to discuss some of the terms. So you'll see how easy it is to actually program a radio very soon. So my suggestion is the Motorola stuff and the Hytera stuff is nice. You can look on eBay. It's going to run you $200 plus for some of the stuff, even sometimes higher. The Motorola stuff may also be called Moto Turbo. That's MOTO TRBO. The Hytera stuff really doesn't have a certain name or anything, but just look for Hytera DMR and you can kind of get an idea. Now, I have spoke to people that use the Motorola's and the Hyteras, and just like in our analog ham equipment, the sound is far superior to some of the analog stuff. But now the TYT that I've got has pretty decent sound, and I've got some good signal reports when talking to hams via DMR. Just going to go through these drawbacks. You know, programming and software cables probably not coming with the radio you're buying. So it's additional price, and it can be very pricey. steep learning curve on the program. And the radios themselves are just pricey in general. Oh, yeah, this one's a great one. On the Motorola, for sure, I know at least, if you want to put an analog channel, so let's say there's a UHF repeater or a VHF repeater, depending on what model of DMR radio you're buying, and you want to program that analog repeater into your HT, if you got a Motorola commercial, that's an additional cost to unlock the feature that allows you to put a 25 kilohertz analog channel in your radio. That's no problem on the TYTs. You can have a mix of digital and analog channels in your radio build. So just kind of keep that stuff in mind. So let's start talking about some DMR terms. The very first one is time slots. What is a time slot? Basically, a time slot allows a repeater owner to be able to offer 2 usable channels with 1 frequency pair. Okay? So before, in the analog world, we're used to, if somebody's talking on the repeater's tied up, and we just have to wait till they're talking. Well, that's not the case with DMR. Now that same frequency has the ability to have 2 channels of traffic going. Could be 2 voice channels, could be a voice and data channel, could be 2 data channels, depending on how the repeater's set up. This is accomplished, once again, using TDMA technology. And we're going to look at a graphic here real quick. So 2 repeaters in 1. So this up here is our old way of doing it, or the FDMA that the next NXDN systems use. So we see here we've got a repeater, and here's another repeater. We've got some type of equipment that's combining them together and then sending it up to the antenna. Well, frequency 1 may be in use for this group of users, and frequency 2 is in use for this group of users. Okay, so if they're talking, this frequency's tied up. Then nobody else can talk. As opposed to down here on the bottom, here's our DMR repeater out to our duplexer shore and up to the antenna. But you notice we've got 1 frequency, but we've got 2 different colors here because there's 2 different conversations going on. And this is times TDMA technology working at its best. And you can look up TDMA and get a better definition. But basically what it's doing is it's got 1 frequency, and it's doing very fast switching to keep those 2 conversations going without interrupting each other. And you're not going to really lose anything. So, these guys here in blue are talking to each other, and the guys down here in black are not hearing what the guys in blue are talking about, but at the same time, they're down here having their own conversation. Okay? Now, with DMR, we have what's called talk groups. Talk groups are just a way for a group of users to share a time slot. Okay? And what that means is, as we get into talk groups and time slots, we'll get a better feel of this. But think of it as a one-to-many communication. And if you don't have that talk group programmed into your radio, you're not going to hear what they're talking about. So if for instance, and this probably ain't going to make sense to you yet, but it will in a minute. If I do not have the Kentucky statewide talk group programmed into my radio, even though that traffic is going out of the repeater to all the people that do have the time group or talk group into their radio, I'm never going to hear that traffic. I'm not going to hear it. So I'm going to be left alone. And if I want to key up on a different time slot and use a different talk group, I'm not being interrupted. Okay. Now, these talk groups can be on a repeater, can be static or dynamic. And static just means that it's always on, or dynamic means that you have to key the radio up on that talk group to tell the repeater you want to use it. And most of the repeaters I saw will normally make that talk group become available for 15 minutes. And it has to be a talk group that the repeater owner has programmed into the repeater. And the repeater owner gets to choose what talk groups they want to put in, okay? And there are multiple talk groups, and in a future video, we're going to talk about the DMR networks, and you'll see you'll get a bigger grasp of that. The repeater owner decides what talk groups, as we just said, he wants to put in there. And on some DMR networks, the repeater owner can also schedule a talk group to be active at certain times and not others. For instance, in Tennessee, what they call VolNet, which is their DMR network, they carry the Texas Tech talk group or net, and it's on talk group 3148, and it's on, I believe it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday nights. Is when I believe it is. It's Tuesday or Wednesday. But that talk group's only available on a certain Tennessee repeater or certain Tennessee repeaters at that time. Any other time, if you tried to key up that talk group through one of their repeaters, it's not going to happen because it's not available. Okay. So that's what we're talking about when we say dynamic, static, and scheduled. Okay. So let's talk about talk groups. This is a nice graphic that I stole from a Motorola presentation. And we're going to start down here at the bottom. So if I just, normally talk group 9 is the local repeater. Okay. So if I'm talking on talk group 9, I'm only keying the local repeater. But let's say, for instance, this graphic here uses New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine, some other stuff. So let's say I just wanted to key up all the repeaters that were in Massachusetts. So I would go to talk group 3125. And I'm going to key up all of the repeaters. And in this case here, it says there's 7 repeaters in Massachusetts right now. So when I moved up the pyramid, now when I transmit to talk group 3125, I'm now keying up 7 repeaters, okay? But maybe next time I want to step up to the region. I need to go out wider. I want to talk to a wider group of hams. So I want to talk to everybody in the New England area. So I'm going to go and I want to talk on talk group 3181. And when I do that, I'm going to be keying up 47 repeaters, okay? So as you see, as we move up the chain, we're keying up more and more repeaters. And over here, normally your regional or sub-region statewide and your local repeaters, they're always going to operate on time slot 2 of the repeater. So time slot 1 is going to be up here just kind of hanging out, doing nothing. It's not got traffic. And all your traffic here is going to be going across the time slot 2. But now let's say for some reason I want to key up a regional, like a U.S. regional. Let's say I want to key up everybody that is in region 4 of the ARL map. So that'd be Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Now I'm going to be operating off time slot 1. Time slot 2 is going to be available for somebody else. And I'm going to key up all the repeaters in ARL region 4. But maybe that's not as far as I want to go. Maybe I want to talk nationally across the whole United States. So I go up to, and these talk groups here are a little bit different than what you're going to see in the next slide. But I'll key up that talk group, and it keys up all the repeaters in the United States that have that talk group programmed into them. Or maybe I want to transmit to all the hams across the world, so I'm going to key up a worldwide talk group. So as I move up, and these numbers over here are really not sufficient because this slide was from 2015, and DMR has kind of exploded, okay? So as we move from the bottom up, in talk groups, we start activating more and more repeaters, and we're getting a further reach with our broadcast. And this is all accomplished, like I said, through IP connectivity to the repeaters. And I know this is a fast, quick video, but this is kind of giving you something that you can understand and you can go out and do some more research on yourself. So let's talk about this is a list of talk groups and some just general rules. So TG1, and these are from the Brandmaster Network, which is what I operate on and what most everybody in the amateur market is moving to. So Talk Group 1 is worldwide, and it's always on time slot 1 when a repeater owner programs it. And when you programmed your radio, you would put it for time slot 1. Talk Group 91 is worldwide English only. So Talk Group 1, I may hear other people that don't speak English. But if I only want to hear English speaking people, and this is American English, there's actually a talk group for European English as well. I would switch to Talk Group 91. And that'll be on time slot 1, just like with our pyramid. But what if I want to, maybe I don't want to talk worldwide English, I just want to talk to North America, which is Canada, America, uh, Mexico, Cuba, those areas. I could go to Talk Group 93. But maybe I just want to talk to the US, so I could use Talk Group 3100. All right, once again, like I said, maybe I'm just trying to get down to the regional calling areas. So I'm going to use 31094. Now, this one is now this goes with our, let's go back and look real quick. Does that fit to our, yes, it does. Okay, so time slot 1, that's where it should be. But maybe I just want to key up the repeaters in Kentucky, so I'm going to use Talk Group 3121. And then Talk Groups 2 through 9, those are always going to be reserved for the local repeaters. Okay. So let's talk about Talk Group 1. This is a map. I went out to a site that shows you all the DMR repeaters. So if I was to transmit on Talk Group 1 from my radio through a repeater or through a hotspot, my voice is going to all these repeaters across the world. Okay. So I'm figuring I'm somewhere out here, but I'm going to get to reach all these areas. Okay. 3100, which is the U.S. nationwide, would be within the borders. Anything you see here within the border of the United States. Talk Group 93, which is North America, this would be anything that you see on this screen, but 3100 is just within the United States. So I'm talking everything, this area through here, all the way down into here and stuff. And just look over these color codes. These mean some of them's on the Brandmaster network, some are on the D-Marc network, some are on DMR Plus. But most of those networks talk to each other, and they kind of keep the same talk group convention. So these transmissions go out across different things. Talk Group 31094. This is the ARL Region 4 talk group, so it's going to key up anything that's in Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. So, we're talking anything you see through here. So that's still a good sized group of repeaters that's keying up. Talk Group 3121. This is the state of Kentucky. This is a great little graphic from the Bluegrass DMR Amateur Network guys. They run a net every Thursday night at 8 o'clock on Talk Group 3121. Really great guys, have been very welcoming to me, and I appreciate that. But as you can see, right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 repeaters. Yellow means there's this one's being planned, and these two purple ones are on a different network. These green ones are on the Brandmaster network. This guy over here in Eastern Kentucky is, I believe, in Paintsville. He's a VHF DMR repeater. These guys over here are UHF. One of the neat things about DMR with internet linking is it don't matter if these guys over here with their VHF DMR are talking to this repeater. All these guys over here on the UHF side would be able to hear him and talk to him without a problem. This is where that word interoperability comes in. I don't believe this repeater right now over here in Paintsville is on the internet, so it's not really linked into these systems. It's just being used locally right now. the net last Thursday, towards 1st January of 2017. Net Control did say that there's somebody who's planning on putting a repeater along the Virginia or West Virginia Kentucky border over in Pike County that will cover the Pikeville area. So that one should be coming on soon. And myself and KK4WH Tim Webb are working on a DMR repeater that's going to go down over on Black Mountain, which should give pretty good coverage in southeast Kentucky, and that'll be, I believe, a UHF repeater, and it will be tied into the net, so it'll be linked into all these. So the basic idea is if I'm over here and when this repeater down here gets online, if I transmit to this repeater, it's going to key up, and I'm on the Kentucky statewide talk group, it's going to key up all these other repeaters, and they're going to hear my transmission. Anybody that's here with a DMR radio, they're going to hear it from this repeater. They're going to hear it from here. It's a way that we're being able to reach out and connect with other hams. Okay? So just remember, talk groups are just groupings of repeaters, and it depends on what talk group you're on, how many repeaters that you're going to actually activate. Let's talk about zones. Zones are just a grouping of channels. That's all they are, folks. It sounds complicated. I've heard some people talk about DMR, and they've been kind of leery about zones. All it is a grouping of channels. Okay, and we're going to talk about channels in a minute. And all the zone does is I may program a zone. For instance, I run a hotspot here at the house. I may have a zone program that has channels in it that are for my hotspot. But let's say I'm going to go to Tennessee and I want to talk on the VolNet. I may have a zone that's called Tennessee that has all the DMR repeater channels and talk groups programmed into it. Okay, it's just a way of logically grouping your channels together. That's all it is. That's all you need to know about zones. Color code. This is going to be a new term for many hams as they move from analog to digital. These are just like PL tones. That's all they are. Our Whitesburg Club repeater, PL tone on it's 186.2. So if I don't have that programmed in my radio on the Whitesburg repeater for my analog Whitesburg repeater, and I key up my radio in my car, my HT, and I want to talk to somebody else, if I don't have that in there, it's not going to activate the repeater. Well, color code in the digital world and DMR world, think of it as a PL tone. The use of color codes is not optional. A DMR repeater must have a color code on each of the channels. It's not optional. You're not going to see a carrier squelch DMR repeater. It must have a color code set. There's 16 color codes, 0 to 15. Now, why they call them color codes and give them numbers, I'll never know. But somebody somewhere thought that'd be a great idea. Let's call them a color code, but then let's number them 0 through 15. If there's somebody out there that's got more information on that than me, feel free to comment. If you set your color code wrong on your radio, you're not going to be able to access the repeater. This is no different than if you set the PL tone wrong on an analog piece of equipment. You can't get into the repeater. Okay? I'm not 100% sure, but I'll check. I don't even know that you'll be able to hear any transmissions if you've got the color code wrong. I think that's right. I think if you got the color code wrong, you're not even going to hear anything coming from the repeater. Even if your talk group's right, it's a talk group that the repeater owner has set turned on, but you've got the right frequencies programmed in, but you got the wrong color code, you're probably not going to be able to hear. I think I'm right on that. I'll find out for sure, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Channels. Channels in DMR are just like channels in the analog world, okay? Channel is a channel, be it a DMR or standard conventional equipment. A DRM channel has a receive frequency and a transmit frequency. Standard offset supply. In the UHF or 440, it's going to be 5 megahertz. VHF, it's still going to be your standard 600 megahertz or 0.600 megahertz offset. Okay. DMR channel is going to be narrowband. It's going to be 12.5 kilohertz bandwidth. This is how come we can operate two, because if you remember, our standard was where they wanted to go to 6.25 kilohertz of bandwidth per channel, so we can have two channels on that frequency pair. Each channel is either tied to a talk group or a list of talk groups. And when in the next video, when we're programming an actual radio and you're watching me program a radio, this is going to make more sense, okay? So, but basically what happens is you make a list of talk groups in your program and what talk group you want to talk to. And when you're programming the channel, there's a drop down on the TYT at least. And you tell it, okay, this channel is for this talk group on this frequency. Okay. You have to select, when you're programming a channel in the TYT, you have to select what time slot that channel operates on. And this has to match with the repeater. So if talk group 3121, which is the Kentucky statewide net, is offered on time slot 2 on the repeater, when I'm programming my channel on my radio, I have to tell it that it needs to transmit on time slot 2. Put the wrong time slot in with the talk group, it's not going to work. And each channel must have a color code set. We just talked about this. They're not optional. This is a color code. It's basically a PL for the DMR world, okay? So, and from what I've read, most amateur radio stuff is always going to use the color code of 1. The only time that they said you may see a different color code is if the repeater owner just for some reason wants to have a different one, or if there's two frequencies. I won't say two frequencies. If the same frequency is in use close by, they may set two different color codes as to not key up each other's repeaters, okay? And lastly, you have to add a channel to a zone. Like I said, if you remember, most of this DMR stuff works off of zones. That's where you're primarily going to be. It's not going to be your traditional channel thing. You're going to select a zone. And if that channel's not in that zone, then you're not going to be able to use it. Now, the TYTs, I think you can program up to, it's either 16 or 32 zones. And each zone can have a total of 16 channels in it, okay? So, like I said, don't get hung up on that. Once we start programming the radio and we actually sit down and get videos of the radio and the programming, this is going to come more to you. The main thing I want you to understand is that a channel in the DMR world is just like a channel in a conventional world. You're still going to have your receive and your transmit frequency. Your standard offsets are going to apply. It's going to be narrow band. You're going to tie talk group and channel together when you're programming. You got to have the right time slot. You got to have the color code set. And then you've got to add that channel to a zone. Okay? Like I said, this is going to become more clear in the next video. Alright, just some final thoughts on DMR for this video. First is analog and digital. Some people's going to tell you that DMR gets more coverage. I don't really think that's a fair term to use. I think the better term to use is the improved performance for what you're getting, okay? So, we all know that as we get away from the repeater, the further away we get from the repeater, the worse our sounds, the worse we sound, and we get the popping, the hits, and the cracking in our analog radio equipment right now, okay? Well, DMR works a little bit different, okay? You're going to get the same coverage, but it's going to be more usable on the fringe edges of that coverage area, okay? So, this graphic here on our x-axis we've got audio quality, and then on our y-axis we've got signal strength. Okay, and this is a graphic that I stole from another presentation again. Okay, so what this represents, this black line here, is as I begin to move away from the repeater, my signal strength gets weaker as I go down, and my audio quality decreases. Okay, and we've noticed that that's a pretty sharp line as it goes down. Well, in digital, and we're going to talk DMR here, as I move further out away from the repeater, you'll notice that my drop in signal strength and audio quality is more of a curve than a straight line. Okay, so when I'm all the way out here on the fringe edge of the repeater's coverage area, my audio is still going to be better, and I can still use the repeater in those fringe areas, and I'm still going to be clear to you. You're not going to hear the popping, the hissing, the cracks, and stuff like that. And so, what DMR is going to give us is it's going to give us more usable coverage of our repeater system, because we're going to get improved audio quality and better coverage and use. Because how it does this is it uses what's called forward error correction and cyclic redundancy check coders. Okay, so that may mean that yes, not all of my transmission got to the repeater, but if enough of it gets to the repeater to where it can take some of those ones and zeros of certain words and letters I've said before, it can figure out what pieces of ones and zeros it's missing and insert those. Okay, now sometimes it may not be able to do that, and you might get some garbled audio, but it's not going to be hissing, popping, cracking. One of the big things that you're going to notice when we move, as we start to make a move to DMR, or you start to use DMR, is static is a thing that's gone now. It's not in there anymore. We're all used to, hearing the repeater trail, you know, and the static part of it. You're not going to hear that. You don't hear that in DMR. So yes, in some ways you do get a better range with a DMR. It's not that it pushes out further, it's just that you're now able to use the repeater more efficiently on the fringe coverage area of the repeater. Okay, so this graphic's pretty important. So this one's a big one. Just remember that while the drop in audio and signal strength is pretty sharp in analog, with digital it's going to be more of a curve. So that's kind of one of the driving advantages of DMR too. So, all right. Once again, thank you for your time, and hopefully you'll like this video and you'll be with us for our next video where we'll actually be programming a TYT radio um, and making zones, channels, talk groups, stuff like that. We're going to be putting all that together. So, like I said, hope you stick around. Hope you enjoyed this video. And this is Roland Brown, KY4RDB. I'll catch you on the next video.